Okay, good morning. So we're starting Siman Reish Ches. These are the halachas of Al Hamichya, Bir and Al Hagefen, Bracha Me'ein Shalosh. Some interesting stuff coming up. We're going to discuss today what is bracha do you make on oatmeal, on porridge, and then hopefully we'll get to Cholent. What after bracha do you make on, before brachas, what do you make on Cholent? Let's take a look. So Siman Reish Ches, Din Bracha Me'ein Shalosh, Ach Chamesh Meni Peres, Chamesh Meni Dogon. So Aleph, Al Chamesh Haminim, on the 5 minim, shehem gefen u'te'ina v'rimen v'zayis u'tzmara, mevarech lachareihem bracha achas me'in sholish. So the previous sieve we spoke about ber nefashos. That was talking about all other types of foods, ber priadoma, ber pru'etz, shahakol, but there are 5 of the shivas haminim, fruit, which you make an al ha'etz, bracha me'in sholish, and what are they? So they are gefen, te'ina, rimen, zayis u'tzmara. Now interestingly, the order that we actually make the bracha in is a bit different, because we know the order that it's got to be is based on the pasuk. If you look at the Mishnah Berurah and Sif Katan Aleph, shemitei chashivusim, because these are the 5 chashav fruit, shenishtabchu b'hen Eretz Yisrael. The Torah praises these fruit from Eretz Yisrael. K'dichsiv b'kra Eretz chita u'sa'ira. Now that's the 2 mezonus ones, wheat and barley. And then the next 5 is what we're talking about. Gefen, te'ina, v'rima in Eretz zeh shemen udvash. Now dvash, hu tamarim, is dates. It's shezov mehen dvash. It's not bee honey, it's date honey. Now the actual order that you make the bracha in, again I think we've discussed, is the one which is closest to the word Eretz. So it turns out Eretz chita usa'ira v'gefen. Gefen is actually third away from Eretz. And then you've got Eretz again in the pasuk, Eretz zeh shemen udvash. So in fact, zeh shemen is actually olives. So therefore, when the father-in-law tests the son-in-law, whether he tells him or not, he puts some fruit out and here, have something to eat, and he's going to see if he's going to choose the right one. So the first one is zeh shemen. The first thing we need to go for is olives, then dvash, then you've got dates, and then you go back to the gefen te'ina v'rimon, which is grapes, figs, and pomegranates. So the order really is olives, then dates, then grapes, then figs, and then pomegranates. There's a nice, cute way to remember that Rabbi Goldvicht once spoke in school. I think it was in school. And he said something very geschmack. He said the order is olive, dates, grapes, figs, pomegranates, and the way to remember is that the perspective to Eretz Yisrael has always got better improve. You've got to try and always look in Eretz Yisrael in a more positive perspective. And if you look at the sort of the trajectory between these 5, you actually it's improving the whole time. Why? Because the first one is olives. The olives, the pit, the stone is very bitter. The next one, the dates, the stone is sweet. Then you go to the grape, where you in the days when everything now has seedless grapes, right? But in the good old days where you have pits and seeds in them, the large seeds you would discard, and the small seeds you can actually eat. The fig, which is number 4 on the list, well, the seeds are mixed with the fruit and they're actually edible. And then the 5th on the pomegranate, the fruit is the seeds. That's all you eat. So it goes from where the stone is bitter in the olive, to the date where the stone is sweet, to the grape where the large seeds are discarded and the small ones are eaten, to the fig where the seeds are mixed with the fruit and edible, to the last one, pomegranates, where all you eat is the seeds. So it's that sort of trajectory. Okay, so that is the end of Alo Eitz. Now base. Chameshes mine dogon, there are 5 types of grain. Shesholkon, these 5 types of grain, if you boil them, or you crush them, v'osolem tafshan, you make something out of them, like a cake or something, could go in maisa kadeira, or whatever it may be. These are hard to translate exactly. Harifos, geres, v'kamel, v'daisa, all different types of porridge and oatmeal and things like that. Even if you add in other things like honey, harbe yosemehem, or other things, or minim acherim, harbe yosemehem, mevorich olav borim mezonos. These 5 grains, when you cook and you bake them, you make a mezonos, or lebasayif ala michya, which is what we're very familiar with. Avalim noin nosan hadogon betavshil. But if you only add the mezonos into them to make it stick together, then bottle betavshil. So for example, you've got a soup, but you want to add a bit of flour into it just to thicken it, then that's bottle betavshil, and you make whatever bracha the soup is, hadoma or shahak or whatever it may be. But otherwise you make a bermin mezonos and you make an alamechia. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah, Sif Katan Beis, Chamishis mine dogon, the 5 types of grain. Now what are they? Haim, chita, that's wheat, or sa'ira and barley. Kusmin is spelt. Shiboiles shual is oats. V'shifayin is rye. Avul on ukoirin tataka. Masha on ukoirin terkshavais. Exactly what these things are exactly, it's hard to know. He says at the bottom tiros, which is corn. Lav bichlal dogon hu daim prihu adama. So the 5 grains, like we said, the chitas, wheat and barley, kusmin spelled, shibeli shur and oat, and shifain and rye. But other things, corn and things like that, that is considered the ber priadoma. That's not included in mezonos. Sheshalkon says Mishnah Berurah Sif Cotton Gimel. Tzarich lema shechilkon. That means you split them. V'hainu echad l'shnayim al yoseh. You crush them, in other words, or you break them up. V'mashakorin greifin, grisim. The iluhim heim shleim, because if they're going to be whole oats, and then even if you cook them, so this comes back to the old question, like what bracha do you make on cornflakes and on sugar puffs and things like that? If you've got the whole grain, then they retain their original bracha. It's only when you start crushing them and splitting them and cooking them, so they attain the level of mezonos. If they're sort of squashed together through cooking, even if originally when you put them in the pot, they're whole grain, with the shell and with everything, because once you've sort of cooked them and they've sort of molded together, then they attain the bracha of mezonos. Or you crush them, even if you don't sort of divide the husks and the grains themselves, just through grinding, crushing them, you've removed the husk, the outer shell. That would make it a mezonos. They've got to sort of stick together through bishul. Then it becomes like a porridge type thing, and you would make a mezonos. And then we'll get to sif daled, and then it's going to be slightly different rules. Harifas v'geres karmel. Harifas hu pirish al ksoshan. That's pshat in crushing them and grinding them. V'geres karmel hu pirish al chilchan. You split them. V'chol elu bichlal ma'aseh kadeirahin. So when you split them and crush them and grind them in various forms, that gives it the bracha of mezonos. V'daisa, porridge, oatmeal. Mikri kashin ismaich when istabek yafa. Right, so you've got some mezonos grain, and it sticks together in an oatmeal form that we're familiar with. That gives it a status of mezonos. To eat these things, he puts a gensi garsten, a gris, which is sa'ir shleimo shibul shual, which is the oat. When it says, we're going to get to it where you're not sure and therefore eat it as part of a meal, that's only if it's not nistabik alidei abishul. But any mezonos which is sort of comes together through cooking in the form of like a porridge or a cake or something like that, then it's for sure mezonos. Okay.
So when it comes together, you mean like it becomes solid?
Yeah.
So the porridge, when you start off, it would be.
Yeah, but
it's cooked a little bit.
But true. But even in that form, yeah. What stage would you eat it at? But you'd eat it after it's cooked.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have your quick oats, for example.
Yeah.
So that's my daily breakfast. Yeah.
It takes about 2 minutes.
Yeah. But even at the stage where you add hot water or milk or whatever to it, it comes together pretty quickly. It's just it's best to leave it 2 minutes because it's nicer when when it comes together better. But already at that stage, it's yeah. And at that point as well, it's even in its raw state, it's been crushed and processed, and that it's lost the status of whole grains. If you open up the pack and you see the raw porridge in the Quaker oats, you don't really see. You can get the rolled oats, that could be different, but that is transformed through the cooking process. But in the little sachets that I've got, you don't really see the whole grain. You get the whole rolled oats, that could be different. Okay, Zayin, Harbe, Yosim Hatam, Kiven du Bola Hatim Ula Hachshes Hatavshel. So if you add the mezonos, the flour, to something just to solidify it, then Kiven du Bola Hatim to add flavor Ula Hachshes Hatavshel. So then that becomes the ikka. So even if you add lots of fruit and of honey and other things like that, it still will have a bracha of mezonos. Okay, that's important. We'll get there in Shem. But if it's just to hold it together, If the flour is not being added to give taste, not to satiate, so for example, you add some flour to soup to thicken it or to make it more satisfying and more filling, then that does not change the bracha. The soup will be a ber pradama or shahakal, whatever it will be. Okay, Gimel. Very interesting. You put kemach, you put some flour into almonds. Okay, this seems to be in the times in the Mechaba. I'm not familiar with this, but you add flour to some almonds, and that would be the food to give to a chayla. If you're doing that, you're adding the flour to give him a bit of nourishment, to help him feel a bit fuller. Then mevarich bermne mezonos, because the ikka will be the mezonos. Ve'im ledabik ba'alma, if it's just to stick the almonds together, then you do not make a bermne mezonos, because the ikka will be the almonds. V'toiv lahachmir legame b'toich hasuda lacha birchas hamoitzi u'patim mimena. The best thing to do, he says, is to eat it if it's not clear what your bracha will be, to have it as part of a meal, and therefore your pata, because it's going to be included, covered by the hamoitzi. So it says the Mishnah Berurah Sif Cotton Tess, bermne mezonos. V'afilim heim muot. Even if the almonds are small. The mezonos, the few, since this kemach is from the 5 grains, hashkedim botli legabaihu, even though the shkedim could be the majority, you would still make a mezonos, because that would be the ikar in that situation. But if, however, in Yud, if really the almonds are the ikar, if the almonds ikar v'im ledabik ba'alma, then einem mevarich bermne mezonos. Why? The hakemach bottle legabe apri v'chanal b'siftalid. If you're only using the flour to stick the almonds together, and the ikar is the almonds, then you make a ber proetz. Now v'tov lahachme mishum, says Mishnah Berurah Yudalev, mishum de b'maisa hashkedim haderech la'soisai nami lisaid. The way of doing it is also to satiate. So when you're putting them together, it's not 100% clear. Is it to stick the almonds together? Is it to nourish the person? It's a bit confusing. It's hard to estimate. And therefore it's good to be machmir and to have it as part of the meal. To eat it, they can be digestible and easy to eat. Because if it was very soft and really just only able to drink it, it's like a power drink or something, that you would then make a shahak on it. And therefore the eitzah would be to have it as part of the meal of potim mimeno. Not mimeno, but mimonoshach, because either way you're covered, because you're having it as part of the meal in hamoitzi, and whether it's mezonos or whether it's ha'etz, if you have it as part of the meal, you're covered. Mimonoshach. Now, interesting question. We had 2 possibilities. When you're mixing your flour, the mezonos, with the almonds, what's the ikar? Is it the mezonos, is it the almonds? So on the side it's mezonos, you make a mezonos, I understand. If that's the ikar, so it's to fill you up, etc. But if it's just to put the almonds together, then the mezonos is bottled, and the ikar would be ber pro eitz. If you're not sure, have it as part of the meal. But that mimonoshach you're covered. It says Mishnah Berurah, the achronim ask, the imhu rak ledabik, if it's just to stick together, imkain bottle legabi ashkedim, and therefore it's bottle neged the shkedim, v'hari tzorich levorich al pri b'toich hasuda. But then it's got a din of almonds and fruit during a meal. You should make a parades. So you're not covered by the hamoitzi. So how does this help you? V'nir liyashev, you can answer to kiven shu chayle, since the person is sick, v'tzorich lashkedim, and he needs almonds as part of his medication. Ikka kvi hasuda lechatchilu aleim. The ikka, that is his meal. His own meal is the ikka meal is the almonds. If that is all you're eating, then you don't make a bracha of fruit during the meal. I remember one time when we were kids growing up. I remember who it was. Don't want to say, but there was a very fancy big kiddush on Shabbos, and maybe eschatosi ani maski hayom. I remember going to the kiddush and having the Cholent and the kegel and whatever else there. I was a little kid, and I came back, and my mother had made a nice lunch, and I couldn't eat anything. So, my dad said wash, and you have an orange, have a bit of fruit, and that can be your suda, because you got to wash. It's Shabbos lunch. So I remember, I just had an orange. Yeah, that was it. On that orange, you don't make a ber pro-eitz. Because if that is your meal, that you're being kaver suda on that meal, that's your orange, that's the whole thing. So normally you're right, you make a ber pro-eitz for fruit during the meal, that's the rule generally. But if that's all you're eating, then not. That's the answer the Mishnah Berurah is giving. If all you're having is almonds, then that you're being kaver suda on the meal, that is it. Therefore you would make a bracha.
Even to the mites you're having?
Yeah. Yeah, because if for a choyle, if that's all his meal is, then that... So then he'd make hamoitzi, and then he wouldn't make a bracha on the almonds, because that's all he's having.
Hamoitzi is not quite about the fruit that you have during the meal?
Yeah,
So you have to make after the dessert, we know that you make...
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. So that's what we're talking about. In other words, let's say I sit down and have...
Not during the meal,
So let's say I have a suda, Friday night, I sit down and have a meal, and then after, for dessert, they bring out a plate of fruit.
They have to make a bracha.
So they're going to make a bracha. So he's asking a kasha, the Mishnah Berurah, if the ikar is the almonds, then what do you mean Mimano the hamoitzi covers it? Surely you've got to make a bracha of on the almonds, the fruit. Right. His teretz says no, because we're talking about a chole. All he's eating is the almonds. If he's eating the almonds, that is therefore it's covered by the hamoitzi. Let's just do dalet because it's connected, and then it comes to the cholent, which is connected. Says the Mishnah the Mechaber in dalet. If you eat grain where the grain is actually whole, there the correct bracha is ber priadama, or ber nefashos. Says the Ramah, that which you make a ber priadama, you can eat them raw like that. But if you eat it whole, even if they're sort of roasted by fire, they're not really edible properly. You don't make a shahakal. That's the kolbe. V'chein mashma divrei Rashba, shemasha hishve chit in the seirin the bracha achreina mashma v'lo l'rishona. Fine. V'ataisus nistapkim yivarach la'acharav bracha mein shalosh v'lekach kasu shenachon shlelach lo ela b'teichasuda v'yifterenu b'birchas hamazon. So that gets a bit complicated when you have whole grains, and that's why you have some fruit bars. Is it considered mazonos, hadama, etc.? So let's look at the Mishnah Berurah. Dogon chai. If you have raw grain, kol chameshes minin bichlal. So any of the 5 grains we mentioned previously, if you have them raw, then you make a ber priadama. V'aramah chelek b'sairim. The Ramah only argues in the case of sairim. V'agarin shleimim tesvav rotzolem shlechilkan mitchila. You didn't divide them up. V'gamle nismachu, and you didn't crush them. Klal alidei hasheh habishel. They're whole kernels of grain. They're considered like regular vegetables, as it were. If, however, you've removed the husk, then when you've cooked them. They're considered like a cooking, like a pot, a stew. And some say the bracha is ber priadama, because at the end of the day, the kernels are whole. To have it during the meal, when they solidify through cooking, so when you remove the husk, by crushing them, and certainly you crush them, they become very small. Okay, whatever that is. Because that makes a lot of sense to make a mezonos and alamichya. However, if they are at the end, this is going on the Ramah, the Tezayin. But the Ramah for the Seirin, you would make a shahakal. Good. Nistapku svirluhu demikol mokum kiven shemin dogonhu after the bracha achrona tzarich levarich mein shalosh make an alamichya va'afta alamichya en yachol ima de'ena min mozen. It's not really min mozen. Yom al ha'adama v'al priu ha'adama. Kamesh ayrim al ha'etz v'al priu ha'etz. That's a strange thing. You don't really see that. And the dilemma seems shetiknu nusuchzeh. We don't see al ha'adama v'al priu ha'adama. V'lekach nish ha'adama eslam b'sofik. But toichasud, and therefore, like any other sofik, the thing to do is have it during the meal. And therefore make a ber nefashos. Just one final point. If you look at the second paragraph of footnote 12, what bracha do you make on Cholent? What have you got in Cholent? You've got mezonos, you've got hadama, you've got shahakal. So have a look. V'legabe etzem habrocha al Cholent. Sheyesh begrisim tapuchi adama ubaso. You've got grains, barley, and whatever you got in there. You've got potatoes. You've got meat. Das agon u'nisn karelitz. Shehu k'mavua b'yabeh haloch lekamon. Shenechtu k'achreinim ba'ofen shekol min nikah b'fnei atzmai. Ha'im ha'akol bottle dogon. The question is, when you've got pieces which are identifiable, bits of meat, bits of potato, with the mazonas, with the barley, is it bottle agabe the mazonas? V'kosov shesofik brachas lahakel, and therefore mavarik bracha achas. Therefore, rather than making separate brachas, he says you should make sofik brachas lahakel and make one bracha. If you want to be machmi, you can swash the potatoes to make it sort of mixed in with the beans. So the main bracha would make is mazonas. If what comes up is a bit of mazonas on the spoon with other bits of other things, then you would make a mazonas. However, that's when you're eating at one spoon with lots of different things on one spoon. If you pick out a potato and you're eating that separately, then you make a ber pradoma. Or you take a bit of meat and you want to have that, you make a shahakol. And therefore, so in short, when it comes to Cholent, what the poet and in the previous seats, Rabbi Yashiv said to make a mazonas as well. The best thing to do is to make a mazonas. If, however, you're eating bits of the Cholent separately, an identified piece of potato, then you make a ber pradoma. And a bit of meat, then you make a shahakol.
Same should be for salad. If you could eat pieces separately, you could eat everything if you're involved in brachos.
True, but so it depends on what salad we're talking about. If you're talking about like a salad with lettuce and tomato, cucumber, and then you've got a clump of tuna, then you make two brachos. If it's all mixed up, like we spoke about bagel bar, right? So you've got two options. If it's really all mixed in, where the tuna's all over the place, then lechor you go after the rove and you make a verpe adoma. But if you've got a salad with a big clump of tuna which is identifiable, then lechor you make two brachos.
And so what do you do with we're talking about oat bars and fruit bars?
Right, it gets very complicated. So it depends how they're cooked.
It's oats, it's mazonas.
Yeah, correct. But the trouble is, if it's like whole oats which have not been processed fully and cooked, it's hard to know. You got to look at how you got to check out how they've actually been made. It's tricky. It is tricky. Yeah.